Hi, this is Elwin Robinson, founder of Untitled Herbs and Taoist Health and Fitness Academy. And today I'm going to answer a very important question. What are the tonic herbs, right? And how are tonic herbs different from any other kind of herbs? Now, interestingly, this is ironically a label or category which confuses herbalists most about the Taoist way of looking at health and healing, right? Because in the traditional kind of more medicinal ways of looking at herbs, the label tonic is given as one amongst very many, right? So depending on which system we're talking about, whether it's the Western system, the Eastern system, various other systems, there tends to be about 10 to 20, sometimes even more different categories of herbs, all for doing different things, right? So it may be for transforming damp, for dispelling damp, for increasing upright chi, for clearing heat, right? All kinds of different roles. And so that's not the way that we look at it from a Taoist medicine point of view. That's more of a traditional TCM point of view, right? And that traditional TCM point of view is based on the idea that by the time someone goes to see a herbalist, or by the time someone is interested in herbs, it's because they already have a problem, right? And so we're looking at fixing it. So that's the curative kind of model, right? And that's also the medicinal model, right? This is actually where the foundation of modern medicine comes from. And in fact, still in this day and age, about 80% of our pharmaceutical drugs are ultimately plant derived, or in other words, they're ultimately herb derived, right? So the thing about the medicinal model is that from an ancient Taoist perspective, in fact a modern Taoist perspective, it's considered to be vastly inferior, right? Because curing something once it is broken, or once you have a problem, is infinitely more difficult, and so infinitely a worse use of energy and time and resource and all the rest of it than just preventing it from happening in the first place, right? So the tonic system, the tonic herbal system, really only recognizes 3 classes of herbs instead of the 1 or 2 dozen which is more common among more curative or medicinal herbalism. So we look at 3 classes. The most inferior class is the medicinal class of herbs, right? And in fact, all of the dozen or 2 different types of herbs which we would list from a TCM perspective would just be considered basically to be medicinal from a Taoist point of view. So they're all things that you use once there's a problem. So the next type up we have is the general class of herbs, right? And the general class of herbs have some medicinal value, but they also have some tonic value. And of course, the most superior class of herbs and the highest class of herbs is the tonic class of herbs. Okay, so what are the differences between these 3 categories? Well, medicinal herbs, first and foremost, are there to fix a problem, right? We've already said that. Second of all, they are unidirectional. So what that means is they are based on one purpose and one purpose only. So one of the most famous herbs in the West, for instance, would be Echinacea, right? And Echinacea is a classic great herb to boost and excite the immune system when it's necessary to ward off, say, a cold, once a cold's already got you, usually, right? Which is where it is, again, curative. Now, if you know about Echinacea, if you're familiar with it, you may have also heard that you shouldn't just take it all the time, right? Why not? Well, it's because it's unidirectional, right? And if we just keep boosting our immune system, and we keep boosting our immune system, and we keep boosting our immune system, eventually that's going to cause a problem, because the immune system needs to be the right level of ready, okay? If it's over boosted, if it's over ready, that can even relate to, and maybe even cause, autoimmune conditions where the immune system is overworked, overexcited, and in fact starts to attack the body's own cells, right? So we want to avoid that. So another example might be a herb that lowers blood pressure, for instance. Now you might say, awesome, right? Lowers blood pressure, I could do that all day, that's really good for me. And that may be the case, but here's the thing, right? You only want your blood pressure lowered to a certain degree, right? You want it at the right level. You don't want it too low, as well as you don't want it too high, right? You want it at the right level. And so if you took a strong herb which lowers blood pressure that was medicinal or curative, then what would happen is it would keep lowering the blood pressure, and it might actually lower it to dangerously low amounts, right? So that's something to be concerned with. The other thing is it depends on where you're coming from, right? So if you are someone who already has low blood pressure and then you take large amounts of a strong herb which lowers blood pressure, then you're going to put yourself in potentially even a dangerous situation, right? Where you might just pass out. That can happen if your blood pressure gets too low. And if that were to happen, say, while you were driving, that would be a nightmare, right? Now, I'm not trying to give you some scare stories and horror stories about herbs. I mean, the truth is that they're way, way safer than medicinal pharmaceuticals in most instances, not always. I mean, there are some dangerous herbs, but they are generally the exception. However, they are serious, right? And this is where the idea comes from that before we take a herb that we need to go to a herbalist, right? And also the idea that we need to be careful with the dose of herbs that we take, right? The idea that we want to not take too much and we want to follow the directions. And it's also where we get the idea from that we want to take herbs only in specific circumstances and not just all the time or not just whenever we feel like it, right? So all of those principles which I've noticed most people have very deeply ingrained are completely true and completely valid for medicinal herbs. However, there is another category of herbs completely on the other end of the scale, and these are known as the tonic type of herbs. And these herbs, so whereas medicinal herbs are more like medicine, they're more like, you know, aspirin and antibiotics and those kind of things that we associate with medicine, tonic herbs are more like food, okay? They're more like food than they are like medicine. Why? Because they're pretty much the opposite of everything I just stated. So first of all, a true tonic herb is double directional. Now this is a very, very interesting feature of them, and it's rare. I just want to say that. One of the reasons why the superior class of herb was categorized as superior, for instance, in TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, there were over 5,000 herbs recognized, right? But less than 100, and I would say even less than 50 are true, pure tonics, right? Are just 100% tonics. So these are superior type of herbs and they're very rare. Number one reason, because they are double directional. So in the case of, let's pick the immune system like we talked about before, or in fact blood pressure. What a tonic herb will do is it will go in, and if your immune system is too high, it will reduce it, and if it is too low, then it will increase it. And the same for blood pressure. If your blood pressure is too high, it will reduce it, but if it's too low, it will increase it. And that's what makes them so fantastic. Can you see now, you start to see why the Taoists thought of them as superior, right? It's almost like they're intelligent. It's almost like they know what's going on. And it's a truly amazing thing, but it's something that's been extensively scientifically researched, especially in China, especially with some of the most well-loved ancient herbs like reishi in China. There's vast amounts of research behind it, and this is absolutely what it does, right? It's fantastic. So another thing, a tonic herb is more like food. And in fact, some herbs have even been shown to be safer than food, right? Reishi would be another example of this. So to be classed as a tonic herb, a herb really needs to be as safe as food. In fact, let's look at food for a second, right? Let's say you're having some garlic with your meal, or some ginger, or some rosemary, or some chili, or some mint. Is that safe? Well, the answer is yeah, as long as you don't go crazy with it, you know. We all might have overdone the chili once or twice, but the truth is that those kind of herbs that I just mentioned, food herbs, culinary herbs, like garlic, like chili, they're actually less safe than the tonic herbs, right? The tonic herbs are more safe. So a chili will just burn you. It won't, it won't do the opposite, right? So a garlic will just thin your blood. It won't thicken it if your blood's already too thin, right? They're generally unidirectional herbs, while the tonics are dual directional, right? Another thing which differentiates a tonic herb is because it's like a food. So just the distances I've done here are on purpose. So there is more in common between a medicinal herb and a medicine than there is between a medicinal herb and a tonic herb, right? And there is more in common between a tonic herb and a food than there is between a tonic herb and a medicinal herb, right? So I really want you to see these distances as accurate. They are actually a long way away. These are actually in a lot similar categories. So all the things we just said about medicinal herbs, not really true for tonic herbs, right? So with tonic herbs, you don't have to worry about the dosages on them. I mean, obviously you don't want to be completely crazy, you know, in the same way that you wouldn't, you know, anything eaten to excess in the food realm would ultimately be bad for you, right? But within the realm of not just being crazy, you really don't have to worry about it. You certainly don't have to worry about it any more than you would worry about, say, adding some coriander to your meal, right? It's not something that you have to be afraid of. It's also something that's safe to have long term. So again, herbs like garlic, which might go more in the general section, which I'll explain in a minute, are not necessarily safe to have every day long term, right? Same for a lot of other herbs, same for oregano, for instance. So we want to be a little bit careful with having large quantities of herbs like that long term. Not so for the tonics. So the tonics we can have long term. The tonics we can have in fairly high dosages, like we talked about. The tonics we can also have with no matter what kind of person we are, right? So we said before, so for instance, if your immune system was already too high, then echinacea would be a bad idea, right? And so same for the tonic herbs, we don't really have that issue, right? So we can just take something like reishi, or we can just take something like astragalus and not really worry, am I too much this kind of person, am I too much that kind of person, because it's double directional. It will take you to wherever you need to go, right, which is truly awesome. So what are this general class of herbs? So the general class of herbs are sometimes referred to as the ministers as well, and they're basically a bit of both, right? So they have some medicinal qualities and they have some tonic qualities as well. So they're cool. They're definitely, you know, good to know about, good to include as and when necessary. So that's the Taoist perspective. Now, so ultimately we're asking the question, so which is better then? Well, it's clear what was better from a Taoist point of view, right? They saw the tonic herbs as vastly superior, medicinal herbs as inferior, but the truth is it really depends what situation you're in, you know? If you're in kind of dire straits, if you're ill, if you've got some major imbalance, then medicinal herbs may well be the herbs which are perfect for you, right? So it does depend on you, your unique situation, your circumstance. But from the Taoist point of view, the best thing to do was not to wait until you were ill, it was to prevent yourself from getting ill in the first place. It was to keep yourself youthful, keep yourself young, keep yourself vibrant and alive and vital and energized and all the rest of it. And so that's why, from their perspective, the tonic herbs were the superior herbs.